Right, let's learn another stitch. You're going to need an air erasable pen to get started and just draw on a little shape. I'm just going to do a little square there. So this week we're learning padded satin stitch. I've got 3 strands of thread, which I've obviously just pulled out of my needle. That's a good start, isn't it? Never mind. So yeah, 3 strands. You can use more if you want to. 3's my standard go-to. Just tie a little knot in the end. Now, what you need to do first of all is just do a few little seed stitches. We did seeding stitch last week, and I thought it would be a nice place to move on to from there, because what we're going to do is basically going to pad out underneath where our satin stitch will go, and that will make it just seem a little bit more raised. So the actual satin technique is the same as when we did it in week, what was it, week 3 maybe? I can't remember, back in January anyway. What we're going to do basically is stitch the satin in exactly the same way, except for the fact that we are using these little seed stitches. Now if you want to use a different stitch underneath, you can use whatever you like. You could just, I don't know, if you like chain, you could fill it with some chain, anything really, as long as it's kind of roughly sort of fairly flat. I guess anything straight stitch based will work. Seed is probably the best though, because you can just be a sort of bit random with it and just fill it in as you go. So since last week I've discovered a little bit more about seed stitch. So the seed is the one stitch on its own, and if we're doing it like this it's called seed stitch. If you're doing it in any other pattern it's called seeding. Who knew? It's just one of those occasions where there's various different names for different things that are fairly similar. So yeah, just to clarify that. Now, when you're doing this, to fill in your little shape here, what you can do if you want to, and that's what I do on the IGTV video this week, you can stitch all the way around the edge of your shape if you want to. It's quite a good way to do it, just to outline that shape, particularly if you're doing a shape that's not quite as straightforward like this square. You might want to just do that. And in this week's project I'm going to outline the edge of this little bubble as well. Okay, so what you really want to do is make sure that you've got quite good coverage, so pack them in pretty tightly. Obviously you want a few gaps between them, but if you pack them in, then you'll be able to just get that nice satin effect, and it'll just make sure that the coverage is kind of level and even. Obviously with the satin stitch, however you do it, the most important thing that we're looking for is a nice smooth finish. So if your seed stitch underneath is a little bit hit and miss in places, it might just lead to a slightly wobblier effect. So just make sure that you've got all things covered. I'm just going to add one in that corner on that note. There we go. Right, okay, so check your tension of your fabric when you've done that, just in case it's moved around a little. And now we don't even need to tie off or anything, we can just carry on. So what I'm going to do is stitch over these seed stitches using satin stitch. Now I'm going to start a little bit further down from the top of the shape. I never like to start right at the top. I always prefer to start a little bit further down, just because I feel like I can achieve a neat finish that way. And also I prefer to leave gaps within my satin stitches and then go back and fill in the gaps. Again, that's just about getting a really neat finish. So I'm just going to go back and fill in some of the gaps between the stitches, and it already feels different to the standard satin without anything underneath. It does feel, what's the best word? I mean, obviously padded is a good word because that's in the name of the stitch. What I mean, kind of a bit sort of poofy. Is that a good word? I don't know. It feels nice and sort of, definitely feels like a different texture just to the standard satin stitch. I know some people do ordinary satin stitching around the edges as well. So if that's a technique that you already know, then you might feel that it's quite similar to that. I think adding those seed stitches in the middle really just kind of helps support the stitches, and you'll feel that as you're stitching, you'll feel that when you pull the thread tight to make the satin stitches over the top. You'll feel them sitting on the seed stitches below. So we're getting to the bottom of the shape, and if you haven't seen my previous satin stitch video, hopefully you've noticed that I basically started towards the top of the shape and then moved down gradually, and again that's all just about trying to get a nice smooth finish overall. Add another stitch in at the bottom. We're almost there. What you need to do is just make sure that you're definitely covering all of the stitches on the edges. Obviously we want to give the effect of it being a little bit more raised up, and if you can see some of your stitches underneath, you're going to lose a bit of that effect. So just try and make sure it's all covered. Ta-da! It's definitely more raised than that one. You can see it there, look. If you compare the one that we've just done, which is the padded version, to the non-padded version at the back there, it's definitely a difference. I like it. Right, so just tie off at the back, get that all nice and secure, and then that's another stitch done. Wow, we're learning loads this year, so exciting. Right, so there we go, that's the padded satin stitch.